Okay, here is part 2 of chapter 1, An Emptier, Fuller Life. From all of our beginnings, we keep reliving the garden story. Satan, he wanted more power, more glory. Ultimately, in his essence, Satan is an ingrate, and he sinks his venom into the heart of Eden. Satan's sin becomes the first sin of all humanity, the sin of ingratitude. Adam and Eve are simply, painfully ungrateful for what God gave. Isn't that the catalyst of all my sins? Our fall was, and has always been, and always will be, that we aren't satisfied in God and what He gives. We hunger for something more, something other. Standing before that tree, laden with fruit withheld, we listen to evil's murmur. On the day you eat from it, your eyes will be opened. Genesis 3:5. But in the beginning, our eyes were already open. Our sight was perfect. Our vision let us see a world spilling with goodness. Our eyes fell on nothing but the glory of God. We saw God as He truly is good. But we were lured by the deception that there was more to a full life. There was more to see. And true, there was more to see, the ugliest we hadn't beheld, the sinfulness we hadn't witnessed, the loss we hadn't known. We eat, and in an instant we are blind. No longer do we see God as one we can trust. No longer do we perceive Him as wholly good. No longer do we observe all of the remaining paradise. We eat, and in an instant we see. Everywhere we look, we see a world of lack, a universe of loss, a cosmos of scarcity and injustice. We are hungry, we eat, we are filled and emptied. And still we look to the fruit and only see the material means to fill our emptiness. We don't see the material world for what it is meant to be, as the means to communion with God. We look and swell with ache of a broken, battered planet, what we ascribed as the neglect work of an indifferent creator, and if we even think there is one. Do we ever think of this busted up place as the result of us ingrates, unsatisfied, we who punctured it all with a bite? The fruit's poison has infected the whole of humanity, me. I say no to what he's given. I thirst for some, I don't know how to say this, roborant, Roborant, some elixir to relieve the anguish of what I've believed. God isn't good. God doesn't love me. If I'm ruthlessly honest, I may have said yes to God, yes to Christianity, but really, I have lived the no. I have. Infected that Eden mouthful, the retina of my soul develops macular holes of blackness. From my own beginning, my sister's death tears a hole in the canvas of the world. Losses do that. One life loss can infect the whole of a life. Like a rash that wears through our days, our sight becomes peppered with black voids. Now, everywhere we look, we only see that it isn't holes, lack, deficiency. In our in our plain country church on the edge of the hayfield, enclosed by an old cedar split rail fence, once a week, on Sunday, my soul's macular holes spontaneously heal. In that church, with the wooden cross nailed to the wall facing the country road, there God seems obvious, close. Bibles lie open. The sanctuary fills with the worship of wives with babies in arms, farmers done with chores early, their hair slicked down, the communion table spread with emblems, that singular cup and loaf. That table restores relationship. I remember. Here, I remember love and the cross and a body, and I am grafted in and held and made whole. All's upright. There, alongside Claude Martin and Anne Van Den Boogard and John Wheeler and Marion Schefter and genteel Mrs. Leary, even the likes of me can see. And the rest of the week, The days I live in glaring harshness of an abrasive world, complete loss of central vision, everywhere a world pocked with scarcity. I hunger for filling in a world that is starved. But from that garden beginning, God has had a different purpose for us. His intent, since he bent low and breathed his life into the dust of our lungs, since he kissed us into being, has never been to slyly orchestrate our ruin. And yet I have found it. He does have surprising secret purposes. I open a Bible, and his plans, startling, lie there barefaced. It's hard to believe it when I read it, and I have come back to it many times, feel long across those words, make sure they are real. His love letter forever silences any doubts. His secret purpose, framed from the very beginning, is to bring us our full glory. 1 Corinthians 2:7. He means to rename us, to return us to our true names, our truest selves. He means to heal our soul holes. From the very beginning, that Eden beginning, that has always been and always is to this day his secret purpose, our return to our full glory. Appalling that he would, us, unworthy, and yet since we took a bite out of the fruit and tore into our own souls that drain hole where joy seeps away, God's had this wild, secretive plan. He means to fill us with glory again, with glory and grace. Grace, it means favor, from the Latin gratia. It connotes, it connotes a free readiness, a free and ready favor. That's grace. It's one thing to choose to take the grace offered at the cross, but to choose to live as one filling with his grace, choosing to fill with all that he freely gives and fully live with the glory and grace of God. I know it I know, but I don't want to. It is a choice, living with losses. I may choose to still say yes, choose to say yes to what he freely gives. Could I live that, the choice to open the hands, to freely receive whatever God gives? If I don't, I am still making a choice, the choice not to. The day I met my brother in law at the back door looking like his brother, is the day I see it clear as a full moon rising bright over January snow. That choice, saying yes or no to God's graces, is the linchpin of it all, of everything. My brother in law, he's just marking time, since Farmer's husband made a quick run to the hardware store. He's talking about the soil temperature and weather forecast. I lean up against the door frame. The dog lies down at my feet. John shrugs his shoulders, looks out across our wheat field. Farmers, we think we control so much, do so much right to make a crop. And when you are farming, he turns back towards me, you are faced with it every day. You control so little, really. It's God who decides it all, not us. He slips his big Dutch hands into frayed pockets, smiles easily. It's all good. I nod, almost say something about him just leaving that new water tank in the back shed for now, instead of waiting any longer for farmer husband to show up. But I catch his eyes, and I know I have to ask. Tentatively, eyes fixed on his, I venture back into that place I rarely go. How do you know that, John? Deep down, how do you know that it really is all good? That God is good? That you can say yes to whatever he gives? I know the story of man I am asking, and he knows mine. His eyes linger. I know he's remembering the story too. New Year's Day. He asked us to come. Only if I want. I don't want to think why, but we know. Already? I search my husband's face. Today? He takes my hand and doesn't let go. Not when we slide into the truck. Not when we drive the back roads. Not when we climb the empty stairwell to the hospital room, lit only by a dim lamp. John meets us at the door. He nods. His eyes smile brave. The singular tear that slips down his cheek carves something out of me. Tiff just noticed Dietrich had started breathing a bit heavier this afternoon, and yeah, when we brought him in, they said his lung had collapsed. It was just a matter of hours, like it was at the end for Austin. His firstborn, Austin, had died of the same genetic disease only 18 months prior. He was about to bury his second son in less than 2 years. I can't look into that sadness wearing a smile anymore. I look at the floor, polished tiles blurring, running. It had only been a year and 6 months before that. The peonies had been in full bloom when when we had stood in a country cemetery watching a cloud of balloons float up and into clear blue over pastures. All the bobbing, buoyant hopes for Austin floating away. Austin had hardly been 4 months old. I had been there on that muggy June afternoon. I had stood by the fan humming in their farm kitchen. The fan stirred a happy faced balloon over Austin's placid body. I remember the blue of his eyes, mirrors of heaven. He never moved. His eyes moved me. I had caressed my nephew's bare little tummy. His chest had heaved for air, and heaved less and less. How do you keep breathing when the lungs under your fingers are slowly atrophying? I had stumbled out their back steps, laid down on the grass. I had cried at the sky. It was our wedding anniversary. I always remember the date, his eyes. And now, New Year's Day, again with John, Tiffany, but now with their second born son, Dietrich. He's only 5 months old. He was born to hope and prayers and the exact same terminal diagnosis as his brother Austin. John hands me a Kleenex, and I try to wipe all this gut wrenching pain. He tries too, with words soft and steady. We're just blessed. Up until today, Dietrich's had no pain. We have good memories of a happy Christmas. That's more than we had with Austin. All the tiles on the floor run fluid. My chest hurts. Tiffany's got lots and lots of pictures, and we had 5 months with him. I shouldn't, but I do. I look up into all the hardly tamed grief. I feel wild. His eyes shimmer tears, this dazed bewilderment, and his stoic smile cuts me right through. I see his chin quiver. In that moment, I forget the rules of this Dutch family of reserved emotion. I grab him by the shoulders and I look straight into those eyes brimming, and in this scratchy, half whispered, these ragged words choke, wail. If it were up to me, and then the words pound, desperate and hard, I'd write this story differently. I regret the words as soon as they leave me. They seem so unchristian, so unaccepting, so no God. I wish I could take them back, comb out their tangled madness, dress them in their calm Sunday best, but there they are, released and naked, raw and real, stripped of any theological cliche my exposed, serrated Hal to the throne room. You know, John's voice breaks into my memory and his gaze lingers, then turns out again toward the waving wheat field. Well, even with our boys, I don't know why that all happened. He shrugs again. But do I have to? Who knows? I don't mention it often, but sometimes I think of that story in the Old Testament. Can't remember what book, but when God gave King Hezekiah 15 more years of life because he prayed for it. But if Hezekiah had died when God first intended, Manasseh would never have been born. And what does the Bible say about Manasseh? Something to the effect that Manasseh had led the Israelites to do even more evil than all the heathen nations around Israel. Think of all that evil that would have been avoided if Hezekiah had died earlier, before Manasseh was born. I'm not saying anything, either way, about anything. He's watching the sea of green rolling in winds. Then it comes slow, in a slow, quiet voice that I have to strain to hear. Just that maybe you don't want to change the story because you don't know what a different ending holds. The words I choked out about dying, ending day, echo, pierce. There's a reason I'm not writing this story, and God is. He knows how it all works out, where it all leads. what it all means. I don't. His eyes return, knowing the past I've lived, a bit of my nightmares. Maybe, I guess, it's accepting there are things we simply don't understand, but he does. And I see, at least a bit more, when we find ourselves groping along, famished for more, we can choose. When we are despairing, we can choose to live as Israelites, gathering manna. For 40 long years, God's people daily eat manna, a substance whose name literally means, what is it? Hungry, they choose to gather up that which is baffling. They fill on that which has no meaning. More than 14,600 days they take their daily nourishment from that which they don't comprehend. They find soul filling in the inexplicable. They eat the mystery. They eat the mystery. And the mystery, that which had made no sense, is like wafers with honey on the lips. Exodus 16:31. A pickup drives down the lane. I watch from the window, two brothers meeting, talking, then hand gestures mirroring each other. I think of buried babies and broken, weeping fathers over graves, and a world pocked with pain, and all the mysteries I have refused to let nourish me. If it were my daughter, my son, would I really choose the manna? I only tremble, wonder. With memories of gravestones, of combing fingers through tangled hair, I wonder too if the rent in the canvas of our life backdrop, the losses that puncture our world, our own emptiness, might actually become places through to God. That which tears open our souls, those holes that splatter our sight, may actually become the thin, open places to see through the mess of this place, to the heart aching beauty beyond, to Him, to the God whom we endlessly crave. Maybe so. But how? How do we choose to allow the holes to become seeing through to God places, to more God places? How do I give up resentment for gratitude, gnawing anger for spilling joy, self focus for God communion, to live full of grace and joy and all that is beauty eternal? It is possible, wildly. I now see and testify. So this story, my story, a dare to an emptier, fuller life.